Let's jump right in. So this is recent language put out by head of EPA that, and I'm assuming most of you follow at least to some degree the news around what's happening at EPA, DOE, everything involved with climate change, et cetera. And to hone in here, like the argument that's being put forth by the EPA now for why we can start to just basically let power plants do whatever the hell they want, is that U.S. power plants only account for 3% of, worldwide greenhouse gases. So, it's really not a big deal, right? But it's like, and this is all quotes right from Bill McKibben. These are not my words, and I think he may have been pulling from some other sources as well. But 3% of the biggest problem that we face in the entire world. And so as McKibben always does, he puts it into great context. It's like, it's bigger, to focus in on the last part, the last bold part. It's a big part. It's bigger than any other single share outside the United States, cars and trucks, and China's power generation industry. So it's like, it's a specious argument to say, oh, it's just 3%. It doesn't matter, right? And then to go at 3% does matter. The whole point, of what we're trying to do is that it comes from everywhere and it has to be solved everywhere. So if it didn't matter, if 3% didn't matter, and because it's divided up into all these little 3%, and you could just ignore this 3% and that 3%, well, pretty much eventually you get to everything. And again, to go to the last line bolded, McKibben's words again, no one would have to do anything and there would be no action at all. And that is certainly not where we need to be. So 3% matters a lot. The entire point of everything we've been doing is that everyone has to be involved. It's the point of Paris, and the fact that we, as the largest emitting country in the world, is saying, hey, our power generation doesn't matter. That's just wrong, or as McKibben says, it's sick. So that's just to start to preface, where we're going to go. So yeah, this is what I thought we'd do today. I wanted to start off with that McKibben stuff to sort of set the context for why does this matter? Well, because in my opinion, every little piece matters, and you'll see, at least I have seen, conflicting, or maybe not entirely conflicting, but different modes of thinking around, like, well, it's not fair for us to say that homeowners should have to do their part because it's really big industry, and that is the problem, and it's transportation. It's like, I just don't think that's it. I think we all have to do what we can do, and that the weight of it is being more on industry and transportation, but I think we all have to do our part. So it's not just infrastructure. It's about everybody, and it's about our homes and our individual choices that we make. And so, yeah, we're just going to talk about efficiency, electrification, and then throw in indoor air quality, because it gets forgotten a lot of times, I think, in the work that we do around thinking about homes. And so, since you've got this broad group, of people that I've known for decades, like you and Mike, Kimberly, and homeowners who I certainly don't know, I just think it's important to bring in IAQ, because I do think it gets forgotten often in the projects that we do. Maybe not so much by people who are on this call who are highly aware. So this is kind of like, and for those of you who've been doing this as long as I have, this is not going to be much in the way of new, but I'm hoping to throw something at you that maybe is a little bit new. This is the conventional wisdom around how do we tackle homes. We do efficiency first. We want to reduce the demand before we replace the system. So we want to make sure that we're addressing under-insulated and leaky houses that have oversized bills, et cetera. The things that we've really focused on checking for, and my company's been involved in and out of working on existing homes. We're pretty new construction focused at the moment, but we ran the weatherization assistance program in Denver and Jefferson County back in the ARA era. So we have a lot of experience having done this, and this is what we did. We really focused in on, and this is what we still do, the guiding principles, the conventional wisdom, again, around how to address houses hasn't changed much. So it's the materials have changed, but what we're really looking at hasn't, in my opinion. So we're looking at air sealing, so we're running blower door tests. We're looking at insulation, which is, primarily going to be visual verification, inspection of the insulation components of a home. We're looking at windows and doors, not necessarily replace them, but we're looking at them and trying to seal them up as well. And then we're turning our attention, of course, to lighting appliances, water fixtures, etc., the whole package of things. When it comes down to what can homeowners do? Well, there are a variety of things that homeowners can do, and at the very end, I've got some resource links that people may find useful in terms of DIY stuff that homeowners can do in terms of kind of DIY energy audits. But DIY energy audits are great, and I really think they're a good thing to do, even if you're like, I don't feel comfortable, I don't want, I don't have time for that. I still think it's good to do a DIY audit just to familiarize with yourself, or for a homeowner. We can talk about generalities for homeowners to do this, to become more familiar with what it means, what the terminology is, etc. Even if you're going to get the strongly recommended professional energy audit, which is going to go deeper and look at stuff obviously with a more expert eye than the average homeowner is generally going to be able to bring to assessing their home. But the person who lives in that home is the one who knows better how it works and how it lives and where the comfort problems are and all that. So the homeowner engagement in any kind of energy audit is absolutely critical. So a friend who many of you also know, Sean Lamons, sent me this several months ago. It was the first I had seen this concept called fabric first trap. And so this is the antithesis to the conventional wisdom, if you will. So I think it's great for us all to be nimble in challenging our preconceived notions about things. And I'll say that the conventional wisdom is absolutely what I believe. We've got to do the efficiency first so we can bring the energy down. Then we'll bring in things like heat pumps and electrification, solar. We have to do those things first. But the problem is that the data from big studies is not necessarily supporting that. And we know it because intuitively this just makes sense, right? Okay, if we seal homes and insulate them, we're going to use less energy. That means we're going to be able to downsize systems. We're going to need less renewables, etc. But it doesn't necessarily work out quite the way we thought. One piece of that is that shown over and over again across multiple countries and big studies that when you improve people's homes, their behavior changes. All of a sudden, they don't accept that they have to be uncomfortable, and ironically, their energy use will go up. It doesn't totally, overwhelm the improvement that you did in a home, but their energy use goes up because they're like, hey, I don't have to be cold, right? So it's a counterintuitive thing that happens, changing behaviors when we insulate homes, and this has been shown in Europe, and it's been shown across multiple of the weather assistance programs in the United States. Another factor is that from when we model things, we overestimate on the modeling side the impacts that we're going to get from the conventional wisdom measures that we have been indoctrinated to say that this is what we have to do. We have to seal, we have to insulate, and our modeling would say for the third bullet point there that at least in the United States that we're going to get 25 to 50% for the improvements that we're making in these homes, but then the data comes back in at something more in the range of 10 to 20% that we're actually getting. So electrification first says that, and this first one is from RMI. Again, this is all from the same Clean Technica report, but RMI's estimations are that replacing the fossil fuel systems alone with heat pumps, and this is not talking about doing any of the fabric first stuff, results in emission reductions up to 93%. I mean, that's pretty astounding. From the International Energy Agency, they're looking at a bunch of other studies, they're seeing emissions reductions for the same thing, replacing fossil fuel driven plants with electric plants, i.e. furnaces and boilers with heat pumps, that we're going to get emissions reductions in the 50 to 60% range. So, there's a bit of a difference there, but still the point is these are much bigger numbers than the fabric first pathway leads us to. In these ones, those numbers are assuming the current cleanliness, if you will, of the grid, right? So as the grid is steadily improving, these are only going to get bigger and better in terms of the electrification outweighing fabric first measures. And so again, and then I've got the last one there. I'll let you read through that. A very comprehensive study from France in 2024, what they're seeing from their study. So when new data presents itself, you've either got to find where it's wrong or adjust and adapt to the new data. And I think after having read all these and done some cross-referencing from other studies, I'm in the place of saying, I think this is right. I think that, and I'll get to it in a second, it's not saying we don't do any of the other things. It's not saying that. But yeah, oh yes, I've wasted my life. Well, it's not over, Mike. We're still alive. We haven't wasted them yet. There's still time to change course here. But it's also not a wholesale change. These reports are not saying that we don't do any of those things. They're saying basically that we shouldn't expect to get out of them what we're not going to get, and that we may need to do a little less of them. And when we are resource constrained, which we typically are, then our decisions may be different. We may replace furnaces and boilers with heat pumps first and then do the other things. So it's not a wholesale rejection of the old ways, right? So yeah, just want to make sure that's clear. So go ahead, Darren.
Thanks for this presentation to you and to Sarah as well. I can't help but think about in this slide the challenges that we're having with converting cold climates over to heat pumps, because there's this lack of trust that it's going to do the job. I mean, there's a lot of data, of course, out there. I talk about it in my material. The cold climate heat pumps, variable capacity, they can definitely do the job down to zero, sub-zero, but there's so little faith in that. What really concerns me about this slide, and I'm not even a cold guy, I'm in the hot climate, right? So here in Arizona, we don't sweat heat pumps ever, right? Even standard heat pumps can do the job for us. But when you take it up to Colorado and where you are, Steve, and you say no, electrify, but don't do anything to make sure that envelope is going to be okay with a heat pump, that's the part that has me worried. Because
Sure.
we're already fighting this perception by so many contractors, homeowners, that heat pumps are not going to do the job, because they don't know the difference between a standard heat pump and a variable capacity cold climate heat pump. They don't know the difference. It's all the same to them. So there's the education piece, and I like what this slide is saying, but I believe that we've got a bigger hurdle of education and understanding by, most importantly, the contractors, because they're the ones that have to ultimately install it and then stand behind it and believe that they're not going to get callbacks and equipment change outs, right? So anyway, I'd love your thoughts and anybody else's thoughts on that dilemma, because again, I don't live in a cold climate where I have to deal with this every day like you do, Steve. So, how does that play in?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, this goes back to what I was saying. It's not that we're saying don't do any of the fabric first stuff, but it's probably less than we were doing. And so then what we don't have, like I don't feel like we have at this moment in time, are really good ways to know where the balance point is. Like how much do we do before we start to put in a heat pump. It's not just throw heat pumps in any crappy house. No, and we all, and I'm thinking probably everybody on this group understands that. Yeah, we can fully screw up heat pumps too. I mean, you still got to install them correctly, which, as you know, this is the work that we, you know, Darren, we do, you know, day in, day out, is getting things installed correctly. If you install them poorly, they're going to function poorly. So my assumption, I'm positive that when we talk about, when RMI, IEA, et cetera, are talking about these things, they're talking about properly installed systems. You know, not what, you know, not what we see a lot. Okay, so next slide. Now let's pivot over to talking about electrification a little bit. Why electrify? Well, it's to cut some fossil fuels out. And this, you know, this is all about, you know, climate change for me. And then as the grid is improving, as we talked about in that other slide, as the grid improves, the electrification of the homes, we're using less and less carbon all the time, and that gives us better future resilience as well. So what are the main targets when we're talking about electrifying homes? Well, it's heat pumps, as we're talking about, heat pump water heaters, induction ranges, and EV charging. Those are the big heavy hitters, right? So I think that's what most people are thinking about when we talk about electrification. Now, that's not few homes are probably going to go from 0 to 100 on this. On new homes, different story. We can do that. We're doing it all the time right now on electric homes. But we're talking about existing homes. You know, most people are not probably going to go from, you know, having none of these to all of these in one fell swoop, if for no better reason than that it'd be expensive. But this is going to allow me to pivot to the next thing, which is there is one of the biggest problem. Actually, I'm going to maybe poll the audience, so we don't have a formal polling mechanism here, to say, what do you all think is the biggest obstacle to the average homeowner just going the electric path? If they've got that interest and that desire to do so, what is the biggest thing that's a hindrance to them moving in the direction? Go ahead. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's awareness. It's just awareness and education and language and communication. Because I think, you know, our Cognition Smart, let me give a caveat to this. Our Cognition Smart data clearly shows that homeowners, once they're given a choice between upfront cost and long-term savings, the majority of our consumer audience that responded to a recent cognition survey, and actually this is the first time we've been surveying our consumer audience for 20 years. And for the first time ever, all of the generations that are influencing the housing market, so boomers, Xers, millennials, and Gen Zs, for the first time ever, all four generations told us that they now focus more on long-term value and operating costs as opposed to just upfront cost or price per square foot, which means that for those of us, like many of us on the call who have been in this industry working in the trenches for decades, trying to shift this antiquated valuation metric from first cost to full cost, it's actually working. And it's working partly because of the work that everyone on this call and our whole entire community and network is doing. It's working partly because of enabling technologies and enhanced efficiency and all of these things we're talking about today, but it's also working because finally the communication is actually effective and getting through to home buyers. So when they see that energy efficiency and electrification and decarbonization actually saves them thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars over the lifetime of their home, they'll make that investment. And so I think it's awareness.
That's great. Darren, then Mike.
So I agree with everything that Sarah just said. And in fact, I saw Kimberly throw in the chat, gas stoves and ranges. Couldn't agree more with that. We see the you know, you won't take my gas stove or my dead body kind of language on the political scale. And so that's right. That's spot on. I'm going to go back to the boring answer that I think one of the biggest hurdles is the heating side. We can electrify the water heating. No one's worried about that. It's the I want to stay warm when it's cold outside. And that is the biggest hurdle, in my opinion, to electrification. And that goes, of course, back to educating people that a cold climate heat pump is actually going to do the job. And so I'll leave that answer. But on this slide, Steve, and then I know Mike's going to dive back in with a comment on your question to the audience. But the thing I always say about electrification is that it's the one thing you will always need. We will always have electricity. How we generate it is, you know, lots of ways to make that happen, but we will always use electricity. We don't have to use fossil fuels. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we tend to be, a lot of us as Americans, we love independence. We love to have our independence. Why a lot of people put solar panels on their houses. Well, guess what? If you've got solar panels and you want to be self-sufficient and you've got gas pipe to your house, you're not self-sufficient. And so the only way to be truly self-sufficient, and it is kind of a higher level argument, is to be all electric. Because if you're all electric, you can produce theoretically anyway, every ounce of what you need on site. And so you'll never drill, or few of us will drill a gas well on our property, but everybody certainly can be independent from an electric side. So that's kind of a big picture argument for electrification, but it's one that I often share with people. So I look forward to other people's comments.
Absolutely. Mike, did you want to jump in again?
Great comments, Darren. I completely agree. Especially, I think you asked for what's the most challenging one on there. It's definitely heating, and I think a lot of it is. I keep trying to say the technology has advanced so far. You just have to, be willing to open your mind to this. Um, Heat pumps in particular, and of course, heat pump water heaters. And um, I think that is slowly evolving, but certainly not fast enough. I think gas cooking's a little bit of a distractor because the the fuel usage of gas cooking is very small. If that was the only usage of gas in homes, we're there, and but however, when you look at all the the fairly recent studies about how unsafe gas cooking is and how, and it's really hard to measure because where it does have a big impact is when it's not cooking, when it's leaking methane, which is very, very detrimental. So I act like I'm saying it's not important, but in that sense, it is. Uh, I, I, but that was a crazy one to me. Just of like I think Darren said, you're going to pry my gas stove away from me or my cold dead hands, that kind of thing. So
Yeah. I mean, I think I agree for a couple of reasons with you, Mike, on the gas cooking. For one thing, like my experience with friends, family, etc., or people who have not, who are, really gas, positive, let's put it that way. They haven't cooked on an induction range. And so we got one of each. My old house where I am here has, a gas range, and our Leadville house has induction. And I'm not the cook in the house. And guess what my cook really likes to cook on? It ain't the gas range here. The precise control, all that stuff. So I think it's a bit of a wild card too. So anyway, I don't want to get too stuck on gas cooking. I think we're probably all in alignment there. It's like if that is really an awareness thing again. I think that's a place we can tackle the awareness issue like that. I'm going to go to the next one, and so I contend that this is the biggest problem that homeowners will face in terms of, okay, now what do I do? Now I went out and I looked for the photo of the jankiest panel that I could possibly find. I don't think you can find a whole lot of these left out there in the world, but I'm sure they are out there. But let me give you a couple of, again, anecdotal stories. So I have been trying to crack this nut myself in the house that I'm in right now, not the fully electric one. It's like I want to move some things here in the direction of electrification. I specifically want to get an EV, but I've been living in this house for 20 years. I've done a lot of things. It's got a couple of sub panels, and I stand there and I know a good bit. I'm not an electrician. I stand there looking at my panel. I'm like, can a 100 amp panel do what I want to do? I don't know. Does a 150 amp panel do what I want to do? Do I have to get a panel upgrade? Because if you have to get a panel upgrade, then the cost of doing everything just went way up. And there's nothing sexy outside of maybe like a smart panel, a span panel where you can do some sexy things, but there's nothing inherently like, ooh, I got a new panel, like you're gonna show off your neighbors. I just got a new electric panel. Isn't that awesome? No, you might show them your heat pump or your induction oven range. You might, show them where you plug in your car, but you're probably not going to go, yeah, let me take you down the basement and show you my panel, right? So this, I believe, is one of the things. So I have my own experience, and then I was listening to a woman who runs a wholesale electric distribution operation in the upper Midwest. She had the same issues, and she's an engineer. She's like, oh man, how do I tackle this? So I think this is one of the things that we're going to have to overcome, because, and this is, not on the slide here. Okay, who are you going to call to determine whether you need a panel upgrade or not? Are you going to call your electrician? I think you know the answer right away, right? Yes, you need a panel upgrade. Of course you need a panel upgrade, right? Because not because they're evil, but because they want to sell you a panel, right? If you call the heat pump guys, probably like, yeah, I think maybe you need one. They're not equipped to answer the question. None of the people in the ecosystem of doing all the things that we want done, besides the electrician, is equipped to answer the question about whether the panel can handle it. But you do not have to be an electrician to answer these questions. You have to know some stuff. You have to be able to add some things up and then get to a pretty good answer, which I would put the answers into this category. No, I am very sure that you do not need one. Yes, I'm quite sure you do. And then I'm not sure, maybe. Then you're going to have to bring in the electrician for reals, to find out if you need a new panel, if you need a panel upgrade, or if there are some tricks that can be done with a smart panel, etc., which is still a panel upgrade. I get that, but are there other things that can be done without an outright panel upgrade to get to the place where you can start to plug all the stuff that you want to do to the house in? So anyway, I wanted to bring this up because it's something that my company's working on. I know a couple of other companies are working on this. Ways to train people like my field staff to be able to go in and answer these questions for homeowners as an energy audit, but a wholly different facet of energy audits that we've done in the past. So moving on, I just want to, because we're getting good discussion, so we're running a little bit out of time, but I want to bring up indoor air quality because it gets forgotten a lot, again, in my point. And again, we're not saying we're not going to tighten homes. So we tighten up homes, we need to be thinking about fresh air. If we're going to, this is again, Mike, you mentioned it, all the myriad reasons why getting rid of gas appliances, whether it be a cooktop, a water heater, or a furnace, getting rid of atmospherically vented appliances or cooktops is really good. It's the best thing we can do probably for improving our indoor air quality, is to get these things out of the house, right? That goes hand in hand with electrification. So what are we going to do? Again, I'm assuming most of the people on this call know these things, so we're not going to go deeply into any of them. But we need ventilation, filtration, and source control on all the things to get to a healthier place. It's kind of table stakes, and probably everybody here knows it. But in the context of doing, I want to electrify my home, I want an energy audit, I want to be energy independent, whatever it is, I just urge people to not forget that indoor air quality is really important, and it's easy for people to space that out, forget about this. So, just a plug in a sense for not forgetting about IAQ. So just to recap, again, we're not saying, I want to reiterate that I'm not saying we're ditching all the conventional wisdom. We're modifying the conventional wisdom. We're still going to need to tighten up and insulate homes, okay? But we're going to electrify them. or that could be inverted. It could be step 1 and 2 get inverted. It just depends on the house, I believe. And we're going to make sure that we've got good indoor air quality. So what are the actions for people to take? Well, start small and then plan big. Again, people are probably not going to be able to go into the deep end of the pool right away, especially since we're going to have to do a lot of panel readiness, assessments before we can get there. And of course, there's, now what's happening with incentives and rebates and tax credits at the moment. You all know it's 52 cart pickup, and nobody really knows what the heck's going to happen. Your utility ones aren't going to change unless they are tied to the Energy Star program, and then they're going to have to make modifications, obviously, to that on the assumption that we aren't able to save the Energy Star program. But I don't know. Who knows for sure at this point? And then again, I've got some resources and tools for everybody to look at, and I'll go to that next. And here's the one. So the first one is straight from DOE. The second one, Darren, is the one that will help people do a bit of a self-assessment on their panel. Rewiring America probably has the best information on the whole topic, really for professionals and for homeowners, in my opinion. I put 2 indoor air quality assessment tools on here. Really kind of nice one, this HVAC guy one out there, and then the Hayward score, which some of you probably know something about, has been out there for a while. That's another good one. And then I'm going to go to my last slide, and then we'll just do some questions, right? So the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Aristotle, a very simple quote that you probably have all known and heard many times, but I want to say in 2 contexts, the whole of all those 3%, right? All those 3% and 1% and whatever, all the way down to our individual homes, they are, in terms of the climate, that is greater than the sum of its parts. That's the one piece. And then there's the we piece. All of you on my screen here, and me, and everybody who works for me, and everybody who works with and for all of you, we are the actions that we take, the advocacy that we do, the awareness that we are out there every day, Sarah and her team, raising the awareness so we can get over the hurdles of awareness and get to action. That is where we absolutely are. The sum of our parts is greater than the whole. So, or the other way around. Gosh, I fumbled that one. Sorry. So, anyway, I'm just going to say that's the end of my slides, and we can jump into questions, comments, etc.
Well, first of all, Steve, thank you so much. It is always good to get into your brain and hear what you're thinking. So really appreciate that. And Mike and Darren and others who spoke up, really appreciate your comments as well. I don't want to take up too much of our 12 minutes because I know that we promised to be do an on-time end here, but I do have 2 questions. First, Steve, this is a question that I get a lot, and so I try to really pay attention to this, but what are you seeing right now? You mentioned, Energy Star and the 52 card pickup in terms of just what the heck is going to happen with respect to incentives and IRA and Energy Star, and I don't think anyone really knows, but what are you seeing in terms of codes, regulations, policies that are advancing decarbonization and electrification? Obviously, we've got California and Massachusetts on the leading edge. We've got Colorado, but I'd love to hear, your thoughts on where are you seeing the most progress throughout the country?
Gosh, I don't know, sir, if I'm really qualified to talk about progress across the country so much, because I'm so focused on Colorado and Hawaii.
Gotcha.
I do think, you mentioned Colorado and what Xcel Energy is doing and where they're going, I think is kind of a good example case. Everybody loves to hate on the utilities, and sometimes there's good reasons for that. But they are doing great work, and so Xcel is on track. Actually, they're ahead of schedule. And so for those who don't know, Xcel Energy is Colorado, Minnesota-based, Colorado, New Mexico, some other bits in between there. But they're a big utility, a big public traded, IOU, and they're ahead of schedule to meet their 50% renewables target by 2030, right? that's just not that far out. Once upon a time, that seemed a long way away, right? It's not very far out. And so when I was, going through some of the process of thinking about this house in Leadville I was building, well, okay, so today, if I were to the options I was thinking, before 2030, it would have been more carbon effective for me to have put in the highest efficiency gas appliance heating systems in Leadville, but not as soon as 2030 hit, that would not be true. And since I hope the house will still be standing 5 years from now, that's why I made that decision, knowing full well that that's what it was. But then I also put 12.5 kilowatts solar on it, so yeah, which turns out maybe was overkill. Oops.
Greg had some really good comments. I was wondering if he would
Okay, yeah,
care
let's
to voice them.
blow this up. Yeah, Greg, do you want to say anything about this whole house DER?
Well, I was extremely excited to be at the first session when Mark Rosenbaum laid out how they installed heat pumps on a school in northern Vermont. This would have been in the 70s at some point, if I'm not mistaken. That was cutting edge, breaking stuff. And as a contractor recently, I have been discouraged and disgusted to see the installations that get done. I have an album of pictures of bare refrigerant lines, and it's crazy. The ways that, I mean, it's typical in any industry when there's a new market and people rush in, and there is lots of shakeout and lots of people get burned. And that there's a certain amount of that effect that we are contending with in this arena, to be sure.
Yeah.
I think it's also
Yeah.
true that most people don't understand what it means to be warm and to be cold because they don't spend enough time outdoors. This business
bad
of just
weather.
live. I mean, I'm a carpenter, a contractor. I've worked on people's houses most of my life. And I tell you, okay, it's great to live indoors, but it's not good for you. Don't do it any more than you have to.
I agree with that.
Like
No
that.
bad weather.
You don't have any reference line about
that.
being part of nature when your entire life is confined within a building, and unfortunately, millions of our neighbors live that way. They go from building to car to building to car to building,
Yep.
So
You're well said.
that's something we confront, it's a nature deficit.
And we've all been, steadfastly working along. And as things change, we adopt and adapt our methods and our techniques and how we even talk about these things with people. We got to keep doing that. And the work that Sarah and her team do with cognition is especially helpful in knowing how to talk to homeowners about these issues.